My husband and I divorced 9 years ago due to a misunderstanding. 9 years later, he discovered the truth and showed up at my doorstep. I had recently divorced my ex-husband. My husband, Nick, was 40 years old when he divorced me almost 9 years ago. We had been married for 3 years and he had been a good husband. However, due to a misunderstanding, he left me and served me with divorce papers a few days later. He did not even give me a chance to explain, so he never found out the truth. I was so hurt by the fact that he decided to leave so fast that I did not contest the divorce and let him go. Prior to this, I had been a housewife. One day, Nick came back home to find my ex-boyfriend. My boyfriend, Joe, was 38 years old and residing with me at the time. He abruptly departed without uttering a word. The three of us were acquainted from our shared experience at college. Joe and I had been in a romantic relationship for a mere 3 months when I realized that I had developed feelings for Nick. Joe had been visiting to extend an invitation to me and Nick to his wedding, which was scheduled to take place in a few months. I was under the impression that nothing untoward or suspicious would occur. I had never done that to someone else, but Nick assumed the worst and left without a word. I attempted to call after him and stop him, but he drove away as fast as he could and even blocked me everywhere, preventing me from reaching him and explaining the situation. I was unaware of his whereabouts and spent the next 2 days in a state of distress and panic. Joe also attempted to contact Nick to clarify the matter, but even he had been blocked. I was devastated, but I believed that once his anger cooled off, Nick would come back and I would have the opportunity to explain everything to him so that we could resume our normal lives. Unfortunately, that did not happen, and a few days later, he filed for divorce. I was devastated by that and did not know what to do. I just needed a chance to explain everything to him, but he did not think that was necessary. I was of the opinion that I was worthy of it, and thus, with a heavy heart, I decided not to fight for my marriage anymore and let him go. I did not contest the divorce once the proceedings had commenced. I packed my belongings and moved in with a friend for a period of time until I was able to secure employment and afford a place of my own. It took some time, but I was able to regain my life and did not allow myself to become depressed. I was enraged by Nick's conduct and will forever be so. I was entitled to a second chance, or at the very least, the opportunity to justify my actions. Despite our lengthy relationship, he refused to grant me such a chance. I felt betrayed and hurt, but I knew I had to prioritize my own well-being. I secured employment and eventually relocated to an apartment of my own. By that time, my divorce had been finalized. My divorce was finalized as well, and although I did not receive a significant financial settlement, I was content. I simply wished to move on with my life, and that is precisely what I was doing. I also attended Joe's wedding a month after my own divorce and had a wonderful time reconnecting with my old friends from college. Nick had chosen not to attend, as I had anticipated, and most people were surprised to learn that Nick and I had separated. I had anticipated that we would remain together indefinitely, as had he. However, circumstances led me to conclude that attending Joe's wedding was the most advantageous decision I could have made. Despite this, I met Chris, my current spouse, and the father of my child, just 40 minutes after the wedding. We conversed at the wedding, and I immediately felt a connection with him. However, I was still in the process of recovering from my divorce and was hesitant to pursue a relationship. I was motivated to prioritize my personal growth before pursuing another romantic relationship. I exchanged contact information with Chris but did not initiate communication for an extended period. A year later, I had made significant progress in my emotional recovery and felt prepared to date. I encountered Chris once more at a professional event, given our shared occupation, and finally agreed to a date. 2 years later, we were subsequently, after approximately 2 years, I married and gave birth to a daughter who is currently 5 years of age. A considerable amount of time has elapsed since my divorce from Nick. I am a markedly different person now, and therefore I was profoundly surprised when, after such a lengthy interval, Nick appeared at my residence unannounced. This occurred just a few days ago, and I am still in a state of disbelief. I am uncertain as to how he managed to locate me, and I am similarly uncertain as to the circumstances surrounding his reappearance. I did not inquire further because I was indifferent to the matter. It was the weekend, so my husband and I were both at home with our daughter when the bell rang. I was taken aback when I saw Nick standing outside with a bouquet of roses and a smile. Before I could even process what was happening, he began to speak, explaining that a few weeks ago, he informed me that Joe was married to another woman and not me. He stated that he had finally realized that his initial reaction was excessive and that he wanted to give us a second chance. He was seeking forgiveness for whatever he had done. I was unsure of how to respond. It was implausible that he would ask for forgiveness for a misunderstanding that occurred years ago, without any effort on his part to rectify the situation. He had initiated contact after 9 years of no communication, with the expectation that he could simply re-establish a relationship and obtain a second chance, despite having previously denied me that opportunity. It was highly unlikely that he would succeed. I remained silent while he continued to speak, attempting to determine the most appropriate response. I was strongly inclined to terminate the interaction. I considered various options for responding to his advances, but none seemed sufficiently humiliating. I ultimately decided to take a more insulting approach. I informed him that he should wait right there and proceeded to return to the living room, where my husband and daughter were waiting for me. Given the circumstances, I did not have time to explain my decision, so I simply lifted my daughter in my arms and instructed Chris to follow me to the front door. The subsequent events are best left to the reader's imagination. After that, Nick was visibly distressed when he observed me approaching with my daughter in my arms and my husband at my side. I offered him a smile and informed him that his request for a second chance had been denied. I then requested that he leave the premises. After a brief interval of silence, he turned and departed, hastily returning to his vehicle without uttering another word. I was gratified by my actions and felt a sense of resolution. The closure I had sought for many years was finally achieved when he departed. I then informed Chris of the circumstances surrounding Nick's actions and our subsequent interaction. He expressed amusement at the situation, recognizing that Nick had overestimated my willingness to forgive and forget. Given the events of 9 years prior, I was uncertain why Nick believed I would readily accept his return without question. It would have been prudent to conduct preliminary research before making this revelation. A cursory examination of my social media accounts would have revealed that I was now married and had a daughter. However, it seems that he was unable to access this information, despite having access to numerous private accounts. Even then, he could have consulted with our former acquaintances to ascertain my current activities. Chris seems to believe that he is above such inquiries. He presumed that I would have waited for him after he left, hoping that he would return at some point. This assessment of his character is accurate, despite the fact that Chris has never even had a conversation with Nick. It has been several days since the incident, and I thought that he would leave me alone after what had happened. However, this morning he sent me a message on Facebook from a new account, stating that he was deeply hurt by my actions. He expressed genuine remorse for what he had done and wanted to apologize to me. In the past, I had made a mockery of the situation. Despite this, he still feels remorse for his actions but also believes that I should apologize for attempting to humiliate him. Ida, for what I did to Nick. Update: I decided not to reply to Nick's message. He did not deserve even an ounce of my sympathy or forgiveness, let alone an apology. My husband was correct in his assessment. He assumed that I would be waiting for him and would readily accept him once he was finally ready to return. He had always been a self-centered individual. He was a centered individual, and unfortunately, I overlooked numerous red flags before I married him. They were always there. He did not suddenly change overnight. However, I was too blinded by my love for him to see him for what he truly was. Once we began living together, he made it very awkward and uncomfortable for me to be around any other man, even if we were just friends. He did not say it directly to my face, but he taught me about it later. He made a significant issue of it, so I began to avoid my male friends entirely and only spoke to them in Nick's presence and never without him. He also informed me that I should quit my job and become a housewife because his job required him to spend long hours at the office. Consequently, he wanted our house to be for him when he returned. He also stated that he did not trust anyone else to ensure that it would be. I was honored by this request at the time, so I readily quit my well-paying job to become a housewife for him. I relinquished my career to become the ideal housewife for him. Despite all this, he did not even allow me the opportunity to present my perspective. I had always believed that Nick was particularly jealous of Joe, given that he was my first boyfriend in college and I was with him before Nick. Consequently, he was particularly possessive. With regard to Joe, he never had a reason to doubt my fidelity, given that I was always loyal to him and would never even consider cheating on anyone. However, it is evident that he did not hold me in high regard following our divorce. I was profoundly distressed, and it took me a considerable length of time to recover and to consider giving love a second chance. You have asserted that I transitioned from one relationship to another with remarkable rapidity. It is possible that this is accurate, however, I am unable to confirm or deny this assertion. Initiating a romantic relationship just a year after a divorce might be perceived as hasty by some individuals. Nevertheless, I am gratified that I took the initiative. I embraced the opportunity with a sense of optimism and confidence, and this decision has led to positive outcomes. I am currently in a stable relationship with a wonderful husband and a beautiful daughter. I am therefore content with the trajectory of my life. I do not intend to apologize to Nick, but I do acknowledge that he played a role in my current circumstances. Had he not left me, I might still have been stuck in an unhappy marriage. Update: I subsequently learned that Nick had been unaware of my personal life due to the deletion of his social media accounts. Over the past few years, he had been residing in Seoul for professional reasons, which resulted in the dissolution of his connections with his former college friends. He had relocated to the area just a month prior. He had recently returned to the area and had contacted a friend of his who was not particularly close with me. This individual was unaware of my marriage, but he was aware of Joe's. It was this information that Nick conveyed to me, which ultimately led to our encounter. It is still perplexing that he chose to approach me, even after nearly a decade of no communication. Despite maintaining contact, I have chosen to move on from this situation. I did not respond to his initial message, and I believe he will not contact me again. I also informed Joe about what had transpired, and he was similarly taken aback by the lack of forethought and expectation of immediate acceptance. I issued an apology to him because I had insulted him in the same manner that he had insulted me. My daughter inquired about the man's identity, but I did not provide her with the truth because she was not yet mature enough to comprehend the situation. I informed her that he had simply been given the wrong address, which seemed to satisfy her and prevent her from further inquiries. It is unlikely that I will ever inform her of this unless she discovers the information independently, which seems highly improbable. Update 3: Nick texted me again after almost a week of no contact. I had forgotten to block him, which was a mistake on my part, but I am currently extremely busy with work, so I am not dwelling on it. In his text, he stated that he still has numerous topics he wishes to discuss and that he would like to meet with me. He also indicated that he is not concerned about my marital status or the presence of my daughter and expressed a willingness to give our relationship another chance, as he believes that is what I desire as well. He then insinuates that I would be willing to engage in an adulterous relationship with him. This is a rather ironic statement, given that it was precisely this kind of behavior that led me to leave him 9 years ago. I was rendered speechless by the sheer offensiveness of the text. It was difficult to believe that he would even have the audacity to send such a message. I informed him that I would entertain the idea only if he left me alone. I then blocked his number, as I am certain that I do not require his presence in my life. His actions are reprehensible, as he is unable to perceive the reality of the situation. I am perplexed as to why he persists in believing that I harbor any feelings for him. Apart from hatred, I believe that I made it clear when he came to visit me that I no longer cared for him. My family is of paramount importance to me now. He should have simply taken the hint and left me alone instead of demonstrating his low moral standards and unscrupulous behavior. His actions have made me feel extremely uncomfortable. It is unpleasant to even discuss this matter. At least now he has been blocked, and whatever further unsavory message he decides to send me, I will not have to see it. I am attempting to erase the memory of the first message from my mind. To be frank, it is simply revolting. Update 4: Some of you are making accusations that are rather ridiculous. I am accused of still being into Nick. I am not into him, but I do hate him, which I believe is a natural response given that I was previously married to this individual. I informed Chris about the text message in question. I am not a cheater and have never been one. Therefore, I would be inclined to share such information. It is evident that I hold my husband in the highest regard and would never consider actions that would jeopardize our marriage. The only rationale behind my initial engagement with Nick was my tendency to be somewhat negligent in vetting potential partners. My husband is at home and I am attempting to rectify the situation. However, I would never knowingly allow Nick to re-enter my life. I do not desire his return, and it is disconcerting that individuals are suggesting otherwise. I hope this clarifies the matter. Update 5, Nick once again visited, and I did not open the door. This time, without first ascertaining the identity of the visitor, I was fortunate that my daughter was out with my husband, who was meeting his parents. I had intended to accompany them, but I was preoccupied with work when I realized that it was Nick standing outside. I informed him through the door that he was not welcome and that he needed to leave. I had made myself quite clear, but he refused to listen. He informed me that he was in town for a couple more weeks and then would be in another country. I was perplexed by his assertion, as I had not been informed of his plans. He expressed concern for my well-being, stating that this arrangement would be mutually beneficial. He asserted that I no longer needed to resist and that we could finally engage in sexual intercourse. I was astonished to discover him standing outside my residence, requesting that I engage in adulterous relations. I was repulsed and dismayed, and I immediately informed him that I would be calling the police. He was given 3 seconds to leave the premises or face the consequences. He chose to remain, however, and I was forced to call the police. They arrived promptly and took him into custody. I am relieved that my daughter was not present to witness the incident, but I did contact my husband immediately. Chris returned within half an hour. He then proceeded to inquire about my well-being, expressing concern for my emotional state. I informed him that I was merely shaken by the incident, uncertain as to how he had obtained my residence information. The individual who had informed him about my husband's marital status was not in close proximity to me, nor was he privy to my personal details, making it implausible that he could have obtained this information. It is unlikely that he was responsible, but I am nevertheless experiencing a sense of unease and discomfort in my own home, which I find disagreeable. I consider myself fortunate that he is only here for a few more weeks, and I am relying on that to deter him from making further visits. My primary concern is not for my own safety, but for that of my daughter. I am not suggesting that he would harm us, but I believe there is a possibility that he might. The situation is becoming increasingly dangerous. Despite his lack of overtly psychotic behavior, I am concerned that he may resort to more extreme measures. While I was hiding in the living room and awaiting the arrival of the police, he repeatedly requested that I give him one chance. He believed that I was bluffing about the phone call and did not accept my account, despite having heard me report it. In the telephone conversation, I believe that this behavior is indicative of a super-delusional state of mind. My husband and I are contemplating enhancing the security measures in place and intend to consult with his uncle, who is a police officer, to obtain guidance on the most appropriate course of action. This situation has taken an extremely unusual and unsettling turn, and I am reluctant to. I will continue to monitor his actions. Update 6, I believe I have identified the method by which Nick traced me. I consulted with a few of my former classmates, and one of them inadvertently disclosed my address to Nick's former acquaintance. She expressed regret on numerous occasions when I informed her of the circumstances and attributed her actions to memory lapses. I was initially displeased by her forgetfulness, which has resulted in a multitude of complications for me. Consequently, I have temporarily distanced myself from this individual. It is my opinion that it is unwise to divulge personal information without first obtaining consent. In fact, I believe that even a second party should be consulted before sharing such information. It is reasonable to assume that a person of reasonable intelligence would be aware of the basic tenet that one does not give out the addresses of others without their consent. Despite this, I have not heard from Nick since he was escorted off our property by the police. However, we are still considering a move, as we are unsure of his intentions. Chris and I are reluctant to take any risks, particularly given that our daughter attends a nearby school. I am experiencing a high level of paranoia and anxiety about the situation, which has led us to consider a move. The only thing preventing us from doing so is our daughter, who has expressed a strong attachment to our home and has been distressed since she learned that we might have to leave. Any advice on how to address this situation would be greatly appreciated. For the time being, our objective is to identify a solution that is both feasible and ensures our safety. Update 7. Nick has relocated to Canada, and I have corroborated this information with multiple sources. Therefore, I am confident that he has left the area. He has resumed active use of social media. Once more, this is how they all know what he's up to. He had texted me once after I'd called the police on him, only to tell me that he still believed something could have happened between us that day. However, I was simply too scared to let myself do anything. He told me that he'd wait for the day I'd realize just what he was saying. He indicated that he still loved me and that my husband was merely an obstacle in our relationship. He even proposed that he would adopt my daughter to demonstrate his devotion to me. He provided me with his Canadian address so that I could contact him at my convenience. I was astonished. It is perplexing that individuals can be so delusional. However, at least he was gone. He had used a new number to text me, so I blocked that as well, and that was the end of it. I no longer have to deal with his nonsense or worry about him showing up at my house unannounced again. I am mostly happy about the fact that we did not have to move. Given that my daughter is content to remain in the residence she has come to love, I am content with the situation. Having ascertained that we are not in any imminent danger, I am no longer overly concerned. However, we have maintained the security measures we had previously implemented, as a precautionary measure. Chris and I also read the last message that Nick had sent. We were sitting on the couch drinking wine and watching our daughter play. It seemed implausible that, despite having observed my family, he still believed that I would want him. It is difficult to comprehend how any individual could be so I even sent Joe the text, and he had the same reaction as us. I am still not speaking to my friend who gave him my address, though I believe she was acting in a manner that was both irresponsible and unwise. As a mother herself, she should have known better than to do so. Not only did she put me in a difficult position, but she also placed my family in a similarly challenging situation. I am unable to forgive her for this. My husband and I are planning a vacation to the beach, which we believe will help us to relax and recuperate. In a few weeks, my daughter's favorite place, the beach, will be our destination. This will allow us to relieve some of the accumulated stress, which has been considerable in recent weeks. I feel that I have earned a break, as I have been extremely busy with work, as have my husband and I. We are certain that this trip will be beneficial for us. Thank you for all of the love and support that you have been sending us.